Vanessa Blakeslee's debut short story collection, Train Shots, was released in March 2014 by Borough Press. Her writing has appeared in the Southern Review, Green Mountains Review, the Paris Review Daily, the Globe and Mail, and Kenyan Review Online, among many others. Winner of the inaugural Bosque Fiction Prize, she has also been awarded grants and residencies from Yaddo, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, the Banff Center, Ledig House, the Ragdale Foundation, and in 2013 received the Individual Artist Fellowship in Literature from the Florida Division of Cultural Affairs. Vanessa earned her MFA in writing from Vermont College of Fine Arts. Born and raised in northeastern Pennsylvania, she is a longtime resident of Maitland, Florida. Please welcome Vanessa Blakeslee.
Thank you so much, Jared. And I also wanted to use this opportunity to express my thanks to the Urban Think Foundation and everyone at Borough Press, including my wonderful editor, Ryan Rivas. Thank you so much for all your dedication and hard work in putting this book together. Yes. And I also wanted to thank all of my many friends and colleagues, many of whom are in this room, for your steadfast support throughout the years. It has really meant the world to me, and I've been fortunate to go to many residencies and colonies over the past few years, as my bio depicts. But it's always wonderful to return back home. And then for me, there really is truly no place like home. And that's because of all of you. So thank you very much for that. So I'm going to read from my story, Welcome Lost Dogs, tonight. I'll be reading about the first half of it. Behind the stable, the afternoon sun cast its shadow across the mountainsides. On the rocky road winding to the ridge above my ranch, a noisy backhoe scooped the dirt away. Another gringo's purchase of paradise was going up to loom over the clusters of tin-roofed Tico houses crowded below. 15 years ago, we were the only ones here. But even then, my husband and I would shake our heads. More and more people born, and the ones already living didn't have enough to eat. Same with the animals. So I decided against having children. And then his son was still running around, chin quivering over scrapes from soccer cleats. That was enough. The stable boy shook his head at me. He explained that he slept in the back of the building, far from the road, and only heard the wind and the horses. Was he lying? He was fairly new and young, about 14. He had been there only 2 months, hired after the last stable boy, also Nicaraguan, drifted elsewhere. I want you to ride up and down the road, I said. Ask everyone you pass if they saw this happen. Tell them there's a reward. His eyes flickered and he shifted his stance. How much? He asked. I don't know, I said, but there will be one. More for the yellow lab, El Perro de Oro. You know the one? He nodded, scuffed the heel of his boot in the sawdust. The one that brings things back when you throw them, he said. At the soda just outside our gate, the street dogs lolled in the shade. They nipped at fleas and sniffed underneath each other's tails. I told my story to the soda owner. He just shrugged. He saw nothing, doesn't open until 7. But he asked how much of a reward for the stolen dogs. Was I just a crazy gringo to this man, standing behind his counter of cigarettes and lotto tickets? He knew me. I'd bought ice from him for years. But had he ever before seen anyone like me, trembling and shiny-eyed over a bunch of dogs. "How much can you win at the lotto?" I asked. $10,000 US, he said. "I'll offer 100,000 colones for the dogs," I told him. For a maid or a stable boy or a soda clerk, that amounted to $200 or almost a month's wages. Outside, the thick scent of cooking drifted out the windows of the houses. But I wasn't hungry. There would be no feeding of the dogs that night, no checking for ticks. This settled over me, as strange as putting on long sleeves after days of too much sun at the beach. Up until a year ago, I ran a small animal shelter in Piedades. We fixed animals for cheap. But keeping all of them in cages bothered me, and there were so many dogs brought in, we had to turn away dozens every day, so that by night, when I climbed into my car, I fought back tears. Finally, I sold the business to a vet who needed the space. I built the dog pen on my property so that at least the ones I rescued could have room to run, to live. What would happen if I didn't find the dogs? Would I sell the house to a green gringo with palm trees in his eyes and leave like so many old friends? Because wherever you go, there you are, as my husband used to say. The dogs had been my passion. But even if the dogs were found, I didn't know if my heart had room for more after this. I ducked into doorways and questioned pregnant mothers with toddlers slung onto one hip. Both the mothers and babies displayed the round, clear faces of youth. I zigzagged through the young men with book bags hoisted onto their backs at the bus stop until the last Tico kid boarded the bus and shot me a wincing smile. I waved over the farmer clopping down the street on his Pasofino. He stopped to talk. But even though he had awakened before dawn, he knew nothing. "Bandidos are like ghosts," he said, and the winds were loud in the middle of the night. So I trudged back toward home. Mongrel dogs scurried at the ends of driveways, barking at me, but mostly at one another, warning, "This is mine, that's yours. Feed me soon, or I'm going to lie down and die." I imagined my corral of rescued dogs running helter-skelter and snapping at each other's heels. When I first found El Perro de Oro 3 months ago, he was stretched out in the ditch not far from here with a cardboard box collapsed on top of him. Whoever dropped him there had left a bag of food torn open next to him. The bone of his hind leg split through the bloodied skin. I had to turn my eyes away. Later, the vet said it had been broken in 6 places. The maids called him Orito, little golden one. I continued through the gauntlet of canines torn by my desires. A part of me wanted to scoop up each dog and carry him to my pen, one by one, until the space returned to life. But the other part of me, weighed down, wanted to charge up to each dog and yell, "Go home, go home." So I did. I rushed one, then another, bent down and chucked stones from the end of my driveway at the mutts trailing my footsteps. I yelled until the dogs scattered, slinking down side roads or squeezing through fences. I yelled even though they had nowhere to go and did not know the word home. I hit the button on my keychain to close the gate, and from between the wrought iron bars, I glimpsed a male mutt with a matted orange coat pissing a golden arch onto my driveway. Above him hung the faded sign, "Bienvenidos, perros perdidos." With the maid's help, I called neighbors and a handful of shelters that existed in San Jose. We placed ads in the classifieds of the Tico Times, the English language newspaper, and La Nacion with the reward. We made posters and fixed them at the bus stops and in the windows of the churches and the soda on the corner. We didn't bother to call the police because they could do nothing for such a crime. The human problem was too much for them. But days passed, then a week, still we heard nothing. My cook lit the candles in her little kitchen shrine and prayed for the dogs. I prayed and cried too, only I kept my tears to the bedroom or the shower. My prayers were filled with questions. Why this senseless thing? Why all of them if someone just wanted El Perro de Oro to breed? To feed the rest to a ring of fighting dogs back in the thieves' home country? I tossed at night, unable to sleep because of the dogs and the ceaseless rattling winds that sounded like my heart. Just before dawn, the winds would die down and I would sleep at last until one of the maids knocked at my door. On a particular morning, this happened much earlier than usual. The roosters had just begun to crow in the pitch black. El teléfono, the maid said. Los perros perdidos. Another prank, I thought. I fell back against the down pillows with the phone an inch away from my ear. Dígame, I said. The caller sounded like a young girl, perhaps a teenager. She said her brother and his friends had stolen the dogs, and she had overheard them talking about how they had taken them from a rich gringa's house in the hills of Salatral. The brother and his friends had left the night before for Panama. She didn't know when the men would be back, but she didn't think they would keep the dogs there too much longer. Her brother would likely beat her and throw her out of the house, but she didn't care. She needed the reward money to buy her baby's formula. In the background, I overheard yelps and the rattle of cages. I even thought that I recognized the bark of El Perro de Oro. She gave me directions to a place in Alajuelita, and I asked her for the street 2 more times just to be sure. I told her I wouldn't go there until the middle of the day. It wasn't safe, but she pushed me to come right away. With shaking fingers, I dressed in jeans and a baggy sweatshirt. I pulled my hair back into a ponytail, the whole time asking myself, what am I doing for these dogs? Alajuelita, near downtown, was the poorest and most dangerous barrio of San Jose. One time, my ex-husband and I had taken a wrong turn coming down the hill from Escazú, and the long, winding road spit us out right in the heart of Alajuelita. Even though night had just fallen, gangs of young men roamed the trash-filled sidewalks, and the shantytown went on for miles. We kept driving into the labyrinth of unmarked streets, just like those of all the other towns and barrios of Costa Rica. Only driving into Alajuelita with a new Peugeot was like sticking a rabbit into my dog's pen. I recalled my ex-husband smoking one cigarette after another down to the filter as he drove on, trying to find us a way out, only to stop at yet another intersection which looked identical to the last. At one stop sign, crackheads descended on our car and rapped on the windows. Finally, I spotted a city bus, and we followed it to a main road out of that hell. I decided to bring one of the maids with me, Anika, who couldn't drive but knew the poor neighborhoods near downtown. I didn't bring a purse, just tucked the reward money in 10,000 cologne notes in a baggie, which I hid in the waist of my jeans. I tossed leashes into the back of the old galloper we used on the ranch, and the holster with my ex-husband's old .45 onto the front seat. During the whole winding journey along Calle Vieja toward Alajuelita, I grappled with the feeling that I didn't quite know what I was doing. I replayed the girl's voice again and again, trying to remember if any part of the conversation sounded untrue, another hoax pulled on gringos. But whenever I replayed the call, the barking in the background drowned out any hint of a possible lie amongst all of her rattled-off specifics. Caring for the dogs had become a practice which sustained me much more than I'd ever realized. And in the recent days without them, I felt as if splinters were driving up through my skin. I thought the sun would come up faster, but it didn't. We entered Alajuelita in the dim light, the dawn just turning the sky between the mountains a pale gray. At a stop sign, we paused to go over directions. 30 seconds into the neighborhood, and already the streets of the slum had us lost. A lone crackhead, barefoot and wearing only a long, ragged t-shirt, approached the galloper. The woman's face twitched and her eyes rolled around. She cradled a bowl of wet rice against her chest and shoveled handfuls of the glop into her mouth. She banged against my window with the flat of her hand. I pressed the gas, sent the skeletal woman reeling, and didn't look back. Then we spotted the soda the caller had described in her directions. The gate pulled down and locked, the building painted with graffiti. I parked on the street, pulled up the hood of my sweatshirt, and told the maid to wait. I strapped the holster underneath my clothes and secured the gun in place. Before this, I had only carried a sidearm while riding cross-country up in Nicaragua. The maid climbed out, insisting that I not go alone, but I yelled at her to get back in the truck. Then I locked the doors and headed to the alleyway which led to the back of the soda. This was where the girl said she would meet me with the dogs. And I heard the restless sounds of animals, the clinking of chains and claws on concrete nearby, behind the high wire fences. A few junkies were sleeping and picking through garbage in the alleyway. I hurried past them with my chin low and my hands tucked underneath my armpits. In the back of the soda stood a group of lean-to shanties. The yard was paved with plastic bottles and metal scraps. The air reeked of piss and trash. A woman cooked over an open fire underneath her tin roof. But I kept heading deeper into the thicket of shanties, closer to the sounds of the caged animals. A young woman stepped out from one of the shanties. "Buscando los perros?" she asked. She yawned. Her crooked mouth was full of gaping black holes. Then she looked me over with slit eyes. "El dinero, ahora mismo," she demanded. "Donde están los perros?" I asked. "I left the money in the car." She blocked my path and waved two dirty fingers to someone in the darkness. A squirrel of a man emerged, his exposed chest and limbs as sinewy as barbed wire. He lifted up a rope with a noose at the end, and the noose choked the neck of a mutt, a gasping, skinny street dog no bigger than a baby goat. "Give us el dinero," he said, "or we do this to your dogs, right in front of you." My heart lurched in my chest with fear and horror, but the mongrel wasn't mine. The golden yellow of the dawning sun gleamed off the roofs of the shanties. I had known better than to come here. "You don't have the dogs, cabroncito," I said. "I'm going." "El dinero, señora, or we'll do this to you," the man said. He whipped out a switchblade. Then he lowered the half-dead dog, the fur already gathering flies, and slit its throat. The creature yelped, then fell silent. Blood poured down the coat, dripped from the ribs to the trash-carpeted mud. I stepped back. The man tossed the rope and the dog to the ground, inched forward, and held up the knife. He extended his other hand, rubbing his thumb and forefinger together. "Dame el dinero ahora," he said. My heart thundered in my ears as I took in the scars from street fighting that ran up and down the man's bare torso and forearms. I reached underneath my sweatshirt, pulled out the gun, and fired 2 shots into the dirt and trash a meter away from the man's feet. A chicken with 1 wing ran along the ground between us, and I spun and fled. The smell of burning trash turned my stomach, and I slipped on slimy papers and rot as I dashed through the alleyway. A chorus of dogs barked throughout the barrio. This was the sound I had heard as I journeyed into the slum. Only when I jumped into the galloper did I look out and find that no one had been chasing me, and I fought to catch my breath as I peeled out. When I looked over at the maid, she had taken the gun from my lap. She raised it to her chest and gripped the handle with both hands, her dark eyes wide. I cursed myself the whole way back to Salitral for falling into such a trap. The other side of the highway, bottlenecked with commuter traffic on the way into downtown. I avoided looking into the doorways of the shacks as I sped past them and up the hill to my ranch. In that moment, I wished that the hovels would burn to rubble and ash, and all the poor within them. Thank you.